Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video. Now right here I have the brand new Bluetti D40. Now this is designed to go hand in hand with the AC200L. This gives you your high DC output, but it also does a bunch more than that. In this video, we'll be testing this to see what it can do, what it can't do, and how it actually works. Now how does the D40 actually work? Well, first you want to connect it up to the AC200L 48 volt output with the included cable. Once you turn on the DC output, it will power up the D40. You have 48 volts coming in through this port here, and inside this unit, it converts down that 48 volts to 12 volts. And that's what you have right here is your output. This is to run high-powered 12 volt loads or even charge 12 volt external batteries. Now on the bottom of the D40, you have an additional input port. This is where you can connect up a car alternator to charge the external battery or even additional solar panels to also charge that battery. Now you still get full functionality of the AC200L whenever the D40 is connected. For example, it can charge and discharge normally. You get access to the 12 volt socket, which is around 135 watts limited. You also get the USB ports and the AC inverter. Just think of this as an additional output. So you have your 48 volts out, and then this is converted down to 12 volts to charge external batteries or even power higher powered DC loads like diesel heaters or kind of like a van life or overlanding setup. So anybody looking for high DC output, this is a useful device if you already own the AC200L. Now I think it's important early on in the video for me to mention what this is not designed to do. Now this is a 48 volt output. It is not bidirectional, meaning that power can only flow from the AC200L into the D40. I mentioned earlier that you have an alternator charger input here and also solar input. That is only meant for the external battery that's connected. Power will not flow from the D40 into the AC200L, so there is no bidirectional power movement. It is only an output, so any additional power output that's connected to this will only charge the external battery. This is not a high-powered DC-to-DC charger for the AC200L. Now this is everything that comes in the box with the D40. You get 6 mounting screws. You get the cable that connects to the 48 volt output of the AC200L. You get an owner's manual, and you have 2 extra SB50 Anderson connections with the appropriate terminals. Now you will have to wire this up yourself to your alternator or your solar panels, so you will have to purchase a crimper tool for these and additional wire. I'll show you guys how I did that later in the video. Now in the owner's manual, they have detailed wiring diagrams, and they also recommend having fuses on your battery connections or solar connections as you install this. Now I feel that there are 3 main use cases for the Bluetti D40, and in the rest of the video, I'm going to do a bunch of different testing to verify that it actually works. Use case number 1. If you already own the AC200L and you're looking for a higher DC output, then you can purchase the D40. If you remember, they removed the 30 amp DC output that powered a bunch of different things like the AC200 Max. That is not included on this model. So now you have to purchase the D40 to get that. So if you want to power a diesel heater, 12 volt fridge, 12 volt lights or fans or all that at the same time, if you purchase the D40, you can do that. So that's the first use case. Use case number 2, if you have some sort of van life setup or an RV setup or even an overlanding build with a second battery or even a house battery, you can now integrate the AC200L into that setup to charge the house battery. So you have the house battery connected to this outlet here. You can now charge it via alternator input or even additional solar panels. And if the voltage is too low at those inputs, then you can also charge that setup with the AC200L, and I'll break that down as we test that later on. Scenario number 3, you can use the D40 to charge external batteries. There are multiple battery profiles supported: lead acid, lithium iron phosphate, AGM, gel batteries, or even calcium batteries. So let's say you have a dead starter battery, you're out in the middle of nowhere and you happen to have this with you. You can connect this up to that starter battery, charge it up, and go on your way so you're not stranded. Also, say that this is full and you still have additional solar available, it's midday and you want to charge up additional stuff, you can connect up an external 12 volt battery to this and take power that's coming from this unit and dump it into an expansion battery or a DIY standalone 12 volt battery. So that is another option that you can do with this unit. So with those 3 use cases, we'll go ahead and jump into our testing. In my first test, I want to see how many watts we can get from the D40 as it's connected up to the AC200L. So if you're looking to power a bunch of DC loads at the same time, how many watts can you get before it shuts off? So first we're going to turn on the DC output of the AC200L, and then that will power up the D40. Now in order to put this into load mode, which means that we power loads directly from the D40, we need to press and hold this power button for 3 seconds, and then we have to push it to change it until we see all battery profiles lit up at the same time. And then we press it and hold it for 3 seconds, and that will enable load mode. So now that it's in load mode, we're getting 13.4 volts out from the DC output. So that means that we can now turn up these load testers, and let's turn each one up to about 10 amps. So they're each at 10 amps or so. So now if we look at the AC200L display for the DC output, which is this port right here, we are pulling nearly 300 watts. Now the D40 also has a built-in cooling fan, so whenever you're powering loads, if it's high enough, it will turn on. So let's see how loud the fan is. So I've been pulling around 300 watts for 5 minutes or so. Let's turn this up to see how many watts we can get before it shuts off. So I'll just turn this up slowly. Oh, look at that. That's pretty funny. I had it almost at 300 watts, and the limit is actually 300 watts. Now, if you happen to pull too much power from the D40, it shuts off the output and it shows this red alarm light. In order to reset the alarm light, you need to disconnect your loads, and then you need to turn off the DC output, wait about 5 seconds or so, and then you can just turn it back on. And then when you turn it back on, the alarm light should be gone and it should be ready to go again. So you can see the alarm light is gone, and we can connect up our loads and we should be good to power these up again. So you just want to make sure that you don't go over 300 watts or it will shut this off. Now there's one other thing that I want to test with the D40 while in load mode. I want to see if you can supplement the power that's going out to your devices with PV input or alternator input. So I have my adjustable power supply here. Let's set it to 14 volts and see if it can offset some of the load or if it's just ignored completely. So to start this test, I have a 200 watt load going out to the devices. So I have my power supply set to 14 volts and I have it set to 20 amps. This is the PV or DC input, so I'll take that and connect it up and let's see if anything happens. So it does sense just a teeny bit of power, just 2 watts, but I don't think it's offsetting the load at all. So checking the screen of the AC200L, we're still powering 200 watts of devices, so the power supply is not offsetting the load. Let's try a higher PV voltage. So my power supply is set to 32 volts now. I still have it set to 20 amps, but we're just getting a little bit of power going out. It's around 2.9 to 3 watts. So even with the higher voltage simulating solar panels, we are not offsetting the load. So in summary, when you have the D40 set to load mode, what it does is it takes the 48 volt output of the AC200L, converts it down to 13.4 volts, and then powers your loads. You do not get to supplement that power with any other input. So it's just from the AC200L converted out to DC output. Now the D40 also has the ability to charge house batteries. So if you are in an RV, a van life setup, or even overlanding with a second battery or a house battery, you can use the D40 to charge up that battery with alternate inputs. So let's see how that works. Now this is the setup that I have for the next round of tests. I have the AC200L. Connected up to the AC200L is the D40 using the 48 volt output. Underneath the D40, I have my adjustable power supply, which is going to simulate alternator charging or solar charging. And then I have that connected up to my 200 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, which is going to simulate a house battery. Now, one important thing to note is that the D40 does not get its power from your house battery. I have it connected up to my house battery and it is not turned on, so there's no parasitic drain coming from your house battery, so that's great. It'll only turn on if you have power coming from the AC200L through this port or from solar or car charging from this port. Now to illustrate that, I have the DC output of the AC200L turned off. And I just turned on this adjustable power supply to 15 volts and 5 amps. So the D40 just turned on and it is now charging the house battery. Now to test the other way around, I've turned off the power supply. You can see the D40 is no longer turned on, But let's turn on the DC output of the AC200L. So yeah, once we turned on the DC output, the D40 turned on, and we should start seeing some charging here. So you can see we're charging it at almost 300 watts going into that battery. Now the D40 is taking 48 volts from the AC200L and converting it down to 12 volts. So I'll probably have some people wondering how efficient the charging process is. So if we take a look at this screen here, we're getting 295 watts. So let's calculate how much power is going into the battery, and then we can calculate the efficiency. So if you remember, wattage is volts times amps. So we are currently getting 13.44 volts into the battery. With my clamp meter, I'm measuring right around 19.3 amps. So we are pulling 297 watts from the AC200L and charging the battery at 259 watts. 259 divided by 297 gives us 0.87 or 87% efficiency. So with this current setup, I have the DC output of the AC200L powering the D40 and charging this battery. But what happens if I have alternator power or solar power connected into the D40? On my adjustable power supply, I have the output set to 11 volts and 30 amps, and it is not charging right now because the D40 requires a minimum voltage to start charging from your car alternator setup. So I'm going to go ahead and turn up the voltage and we'll see when it starts charging. So I've been turning this up. I'm guessing it's going to kick in sometime soon, somewhere near the upper 12 volt range. Okay, so 12.8 volts, it started pulling power from the adjustable power supply and it cut off the charging to the AC200L. I think it's going to be, a little bit of time to think. We should see this jump up here in a second. So let's see what happens. Okay, we got a click. And now I have the power supply set to 30 amps. So let's see how many amps it's going to pull. Okay, so it's pulling around 20 amps from this adjustable power supply. So it's going to pull around 20 amps from your car alternator, which isn't bad. So we are charging at around 268 watts. So that seems a bit more efficient. Remember, we were charging the battery at 259 and now we're getting around 268. So it is much more efficient on the 12 volt charging level. Now let's turn down the voltage to see what happens. Like, when is the voltage cut off for this? Okay, so you can see the amperage is dropping as the voltage drops down because it senses the battery voltage is dropping. So now we're down around 1 amp. Okay, so it's charging really slowly at this lower voltage. Let's see when it's going to shut off. I think in the manual it says around 11.8 or 11.7 volts. So let's just see what happens here. So only 12 watts being pulled from the power supply right now. It's going to take some time to swap over to, yep, there it goes. So it swapped over to the AC200L to charge. So it looks like 11.7 volts is the low voltage cutoff. So when your battery gets down to 11.7 volts, it will shut off. But if you notice, the high amperage kind of dropped down as the voltage dropped. So it's never going to completely kill your battery, and it'll swap over to the AC200L as the voltage drops down. Now that simulation was useful to see what happens when we're charging with a car alternator setup, what voltage it starts and stops at. Now, because this is a lower voltage, we are charging from the AC200L, still pulling around 297 watts going into the house battery. But you can also connect solar up to this same port, up to 36 volts open circuit. So what happens as solar is connected to this port? Now with a voltage open circuit of 36 volts, you are most likely going to be connecting 12 volt solar panels in parallel to this unit. Most solar panels will not support series because of that 36 volt cutoff, so just keep that in mind. With 12 volt panels in parallel, let's say we're going to get 22 volts under peak load, and that's a little bit high, but we can see what happens. Okay, so it instantly swapped from the AC200L over to the adjustable power supply simulating solar. So 22 volts at basically 19 to 20 amps, or around 400 plus watts. Now just to recap some of the testing here, whenever you have the proper voltage coming into this red port, either from alternator charging or solar panels, it will give priority to that charging port. But if that's not available, you can take the power out from your AC200L and charge your house battery. So it's awesome that you get priority through this red charging port, but you still have the ability to charge your house battery through the AC200L. But does the D40 function on its own without the AC200L connected? Well, you can see right here that I do not have the AC200L connected. I only have power coming from this adjustable power supply, and it is still charging my house battery. So you do not need the AC200L. All you need is a proper input voltage here, whether that be from your car alternator or solar panels, and it will charge your house battery. So pretty cool. You can use this as a standalone charger as well. For the final testing scenario, I want to show you how easy it is to use the D40 to charge an external 12-volt battery. Now, the D40 supports multiple battery chemistries. You can charge lead acid, lithium iron phosphate, AGM, or gel batteries, or even calcium batteries. To change that mode, you just push and hold the power button down, and then it'll start to flash, and then you just cycle through the charging options to change your battery chemistries. And then if you have them all selected like this, it's called load mode, and then you have to push it again to get back to lead acid. But we're charging a lithium iron phosphate battery, so I'll leave it on that. Push and hold the charging button till it flashes, and you're good to go. Using the D40 to charge an external 12-volt battery could be very useful. For example, if you had a dead starter battery on your vehicle, you could use this to charge it up. Also, you could charge your RV house batteries like I've already showed you. And if you also wanted to have a DIY expansion battery, you could take the power from the AC200L using the D40 and dump it into a DIY expansion battery to charge up the power station later. For example, if you look at the screen of the AC200L, it is 100% state of charge. And let's say we had 1,000 watts of solar connected into this, and it was the middle of the day and it was really sunny weather. Well, that solar is being wasted. So what you could do is take the D40, connect it up to a 12-volt battery, and store power in this battery. So when solar's not around, whether it's nighttime or it's cloudy, you can take the power that we got from solar that was extra and then put it back into the power station. So I want to do a quick demo of connecting an external battery to the D40. So first you want to have the AC200L DC output enabled. That will turn on the D40. Then you'll want to make sure you choose the proper battery chemistry. I have it set to lithium iron phosphate because that's what this battery is. Now I've opted to go with heavy-duty alligator clamps for this test. Now the hardest part about setting up the D40 is the fact that you have to set up your wiring. So I've opted to go with these. We're just going to go ahead and clip these onto the battery, and then within a few seconds it should actually start charging. So if you look at the screen of the AC200L, we are now charging this battery at 300 watts. So super easy to do. Well, now that the D40 is charging up the external battery at 300 watts, I could connect up solar panels to the AC200L and use pass-through charging to keep that full. So then I'm taking the extra power from the solar that was not being used and I'm storing it in a different power source so I can use it later. Okay guys, that was a ton of information, lots of different tests, but I just wanted to show you the different ways that you could use the D40. So hopefully you guys found that information helpful. Now I'd say the hardest part about setting up the D40 is actually finding out, how you want to wire this. I showed you earlier that it comes with these two SB50 connections. The red is for the input here and the white is for the output, but it doesn't come with any wiring, fuses, anything like that. So right after this, I'll show you guys how to crimp these. You will need to purchase the wiring that you want to use, and you will have to purchase an SB50 crimper, which I'll also include down in the video description. Now, what I decided to do is I decided to go with these 10 gauge XT90 connections so that it can handle the rated 30 amps output, and also I can just connect whatever I want up to these XT90 connections. They're a great connection. I actually have gone with the anti-spark connections. They have a little built-in resistor. For example, if I want to connect up directly to a battery using alligator clamps, I have the alligator clamps with XT90, so that's really easy. And the options really are endless because you can just purchase these XT90s with 10 gauge wire off Amazon for fairly cheap, and then you just build your wire from there. But I made both of these so I have an input and output, and then XT90 to go to whatever else I need. So let's go ahead and jump into how to crimp up these connections. Now, I thought it'd be helpful to show you guys the setup process for these connections for the D40. So these are Anderson SB50 connections. You have a red one for the input and you have a gray one for the DC output. Now, to do this, you do need some tools. So you need a SB50 crimper, you need some snips and some wire strippers, and I've decided to go with these XT90 anti-spark connections. So for the output, I've gone with this female connection, and I've already set up the input, which is a male connection. So I've done this one. I'll walk through the process on this one. So the first step is to strip back the insulation, and you want to strip back about as long as the terminal allows. You're going to twist this and then stick on one of these. Now there is a proper orientation to each of these terminals, and see how that clip is right there. If you look down in here, right there, you can see that that clip needs to go over this little metal piece, so it snaps in like that. And so what you'll want to do is look for the negative side and then orient it like this. So that is how it needs to go, and then you want to make sure that both the positive and negative are lined up the same way. So let's crimp this on and then we'll do that one. So once you have it lined up properly, you're going to put it into the crimpers. Now this is a nicer set of ratcheting crimpers, so you can see it clicks in. And then you really got to bring down the weight on this thing. Yep, and like that. Let's see if we can get the last crimp. There's one last ratchet. Oh man, one more. Come on. There we go. You can see that that is, takes quite the force to do it, but good crimp on that one. So we'll do the other side. Now you want to make sure that these are lined up. So we have the positive and negative here, and they're lined up pretty straight. And then remember, these clip in over those metal spring tabs in there. So this is the proper orientation. So I'll make sure that I get this one lined up, and then we'll crimp this one. So moving along to the next terminal, let's go ahead and crimp this. One more click. Let's see if we can get the last click. Oh man, it takes a lot of pressure. There's what it looks like once they are both crimped in. So the last step is to take your terminals, and basically what you do is you put it in there and you set it down like this, and then you take a screwdriver and you just push it in, and it will, if you have it aligned properly, it'll go in and click in. And then you can see that they are now over those spring tabs. Both those there, and they are clicked in. So now we have both of these that are set up. Now there's one final thing that I want to show you with these SB50 connections. If you pay attention to this middle piece here, they are different. And that's because each color will snap into its appropriate color. You cannot take two colors and snap them together because they have different locking pieces here in the middle, like different keys. So grays will connect to grays and reds will connect to reds. They will not connect to each other. Now on the top of the Bluetti D40, you have a bunch of specifications to help you design your wiring setup with the fuses. For example, the DC input coming from the AC200L is 45 to 60 volts at 8 amps max. Now that has its own dedicated wire, so you don't have to worry about a fuse there. Now for your PV or engine input, it's 12 to 36 volts input at around 20 amps max. So you're good for 12 gauge wire there and a 20 amp fuse. Now for the DC output charging external batteries, for AGM or gel mode, it's 14.7 volts at 30 amps. For LiFePO 4, it's 14.4 volts at 30 amps. For lead acid, it's 14.4 at 30 amps. And for calcium batteries, it's 15.4 at 30 amps. So for all of those, you'll want to use 10 gauge wire and a 30 amp fuse. Now, if you're running a direct load in load mode on this, it's 12 volts at 20 amps. Now, one last recommendation for your wiring. If you are planning to set this up to your alternator, remember it's going to pull around 20 amps from your alternator. So if you have quite the distance between this and your alternator, I would probably recommend using 8 gauge wire just so that you don't have any voltage drop during that length of wire. So if it's 20 to 25 feet, depending on where you have this set up, I'd recommend using 8 gauge wire. And if it's kind of a shorter distance, you'd probably be safe with 10 gauge wire. If you use 12 gauge wire and you are pulling the full 20 amps through that, you will notice significant voltage drop over a longer distance. So just keep in mind, for the alternator charging input, use a larger gauge wire so you don't have any voltage drop. Now, if all that information kind of goes over your head or it's a bit overwhelming, I am available via a consulting service called Ask Me. I can help you walk through the proper wire size, adapters, and fuses if you want to wire this thing up. So just reach out and I can help you. Now, what about the pricing on the Bluetti D40? Now, if you look at their website, it's currently available for $199. I'll make sure I include the link to that down in the video description so you guys can find that. Bluetti also provided a $20 off discount code for my viewers, which brings the price down to $179, and that will be valid till the end of this June. But it is a well-built device. It's very hefty. It's got some weight to it. It has the built-in fans, and you're going to charge your batteries anywhere between 300 and 400 watts, or power your DC loads at that amount. So this does have quite a bit of power available. Now, obviously, it's only compatible right now with the AC200L because it has the 48 volt output. So this will not work with any other Bluetti power stations right now, and I'm not sure, future compatibility. Now, you guys, I really want to know your thoughts on this product. So let me know down in the comment section. Leave a comment. Let me know if you would use this or how you would use it, or if you'd want to buy one. Now, I really appreciate you guys sticking around to the end of the video. Please give me a thumbs up if you like the content. I'm going to recommend a couple other videos that you can check out on your way out. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you guys in the next one.